Chapter 11. When I arrived at the housing court, the clerk's office was filled with all kinds of people. The lawyers were easy to spot. Most wore standard suit attire coupled with a briefcase. Next to the wall, were a dozen or so computer terminals that contained the county's evictions. I did a search for Veronica's name. Nothing came up. That meant the eviction had to be filed under someone else's name. Unfortunately, the computer wouldn't let me search by address. I pulled out my phone from my purse and did a search for the county recorder's number. I clicked the link to the number. After a few seconds, I was connected to a female clerk with a squeaky voice. I asked her for the name of the owner for Veronica's address. The clerk put me on hold for a couple minutes and then returned. She told me that Samantha Cotfland was the owner. I thanked the clerk for the information and then hit the end button. I then typed her name in the courthouse's computer. I smiled. A case came up with her name. I quickly reviewed the summary for the court docs. Samantha had lost the house because of a bank foreclosure. Brad had told me the truth. Samantha's eviction was scheduled for tomorrow. I checked for the case's attorneys of record. There was no one representing Samantha. Apparently, she hadn't filed any papers in the case and a default had been entered against her. I then did a search for the attorney for the bank. Calvin Narch's name came up. That didn't make any sense. Why would Calvin evict his own girlfriend? Surely, sleeping with her had to be a conflict of interest. I then did a search for Samantha on my phone. After a few minutes, I found out that her social media name was Sami Chameleon. The straightlist photo of Samantha that Brad had shown me was on various sites. There were several pics showing Samantha dressed up as an old woman with missing teeth. In others, she was a morbidly obese middle-aged woman with frizzy red hair and blue eyeshadow. Samantha also had a blog. It was called, Chameleons, Makeup, and Drama. In her last post, she ranted about her upcoming eviction. I'm losing my house. You know, the one I got from my grandma. I shouldn't have taken that loan against it for my business. You know, the one that crashed last year. Guess no one wants to buy makeup that will help you turn ugly. Anyway, I couldn't keep up with those damn payments. They were over $2,500 a month. Tried loan modification, but they wouldn't give it to me. A couple weeks ago, I found out that the lawyer for the bank is someone I know. We're really close, you know. Like personally and other things. But I can't talk to him because he thinks I'm someone else. That's the problem with being a chameleon. No one knows who you really are. Oh well. I'll figure out something. I always do. I did search on Samantha's blog for other posts related to the foreclosure. There weren't any others. On top of this, Samantha's last post had been written the day before Calvin's death. She had lied to him about her real identity. Was that enough to convict her for his murder? Probably not, but at least she had motive. What didn't make sense to me was why Samantha was pretending to be Veronica. What was the benefit? It obviously wasn't money because Samantha had lost the house. The bigger issue is that I had no idea where Samantha was. She hadn't posted anything else online since her last post. I had no address or phone number. I did a search on the blog for an email address. There wasn't anything posted. I also searched various sites and found nothing. I went back to her blog and stared at the post about the pending eviction. There were no comments. In the comments section, I typed the following: "Sorry that you're having a bad time. So many of us are losing our homes and it isn't fair. Hope you were able to do something to keep your house or find something new. Let us know what happened. Take care of yourself." I then hit the submit button. Hopefully, she would read my comment and respond. If not, there had to be another way to find her. My next stop would be the county criminal courthouse. With Samantha's affinity for changing her appearance and stealing IDs, I might find something on her. Chapter 12. The county's criminal courthouse was inside an old brick building. Unlike the housing court, it didn't have any computer terminals. Nor did it have a general index for criminal defendants. Instead, you had to request microfiche for each year that you wanted to review. I filled out a form and handed it to a 20-something female clerk with slicked back strawberry blonde hair. The clerk took the form and retrieved the microfiche for me. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" she asked. "No, that's it," I replied. I took the microfiche and walked over to the microfiche reader machine. I inserted the list of cases for this year and I found nothing under Samantha's name. I then inserted other microfiche for the preceding 10 years. I found one case. I pulled out my notepad and pen from my computer bag and wrote down the case number. I gathered the microfiche, my belongings and walked to the table that had the forms for case file requests. I quickly completed the form and then walked back up to the clerk. I handed the clerk the microfiche files. "I found a case that I'd like to see. Here's the form." The clerk nodded and took the form. I waited for a few minutes until she came back with the file and handed it to me. I walked to an empty table and sat down. I opened the case file and saw a mugshot of a slightly younger Samantha with long dark hair. In April 2007, she had been charged with felony assault along with impersonating an attorney. According to the police report, she had been shopping downtown at the renowned Qualup's Clothing and More. When she tried to purchase a $300 dress with a credit card, her transaction was declined. After Samantha claimed her credit card was good, the owner ran her card again. It was again denied. Samantha became indigent. She said she was a lawyer and threatened to sue the owner for having a faulty credit card machine, which caused her undue distress. The owner demanded that Samantha leave. She refused. Samantha grabbed the dress from the counter. The owner told her to put down the dress. Samantha ignored the owner's request. Instead, she walked into the dressing room and changed into the dress. The owner demanded she take the dress off. Samantha told the owner to stop harassing her. The owner then walked up to Samantha and tried to pull off the dress off her. Samantha punched the owner in the face. The owner scurried away with blood dripping from her mouth. She then called the police. Samantha was later arrested and taken to the women's jail. Because Samantha was low income, her case was assigned to the county's public defender. They were able to work out a deal with the DA's office. The DA agreed to reduce the felony assault charge to misdemeanor assault and drop the charge of impersonating an attorney. Samantha was sentenced to 12 days in county jail, 100 hours of community service, and 3 years of probation. I flipped through the other pages of the file. There was pending petition for expungement because Samantha had successfully completed her jail sentence, probation, and community service. There was also a letter from the probation office. The letter noted that she had successfully her community service with tenant liberties. My eyes glommed on the word tenant liberties. Manuel was the leader of tenant liberties and Samantha had performed her community service for his organization. She also had been romantically involved with Calvin Norwich, the county's eviction lawyer. Samantha was the link between them. However, a mere connection didn't mean that Samantha had killed them, but it was the best evidence I had so far. And maybe, it would lead to something more. I walked back to the clerk's desk, handed her the file, and asked her to make a copy of probation's letter. After a couple minutes, the clerk returned with a copy. I thanked her for her time. I then opened my bag and carefully placed the letter inside. I checked my phone for emails and messages. No one had called me. The only emails were ads for things that I didn't need. I tapped the internet icon and went to Samantha's blog. To my chagrin, she hadn't responded to my post. So, I still had no idea where she was. My next stop would be Tenant Liberties. Perhaps, I would find out more about Samantha's connection to them. When I arrived at Tenant Liberties, it had a sign on its glass door saying closed for funeral. Will reopen tomorrow. I pulled out my phone from my bag and did a search. After a couple of clicks, I found that the funeral was being held at Elizabeth Cemetery 5 p.m. in downtown Chatlin. I looked at my watch. It was 5:13 p.m. The cemetery was just a few blocks away. So, I'd be a tad late. I glanced down at my gray sweater, black leggings, and knee-high black boots. Not exactly funeral attire. However, I doubted that Manuel's supporters would care about my clothes. And if they did, it was too late to change into anything. I got into my car and drove down Main Street for a couple miles until I reached the cemetery. To my surprise, the parking lot was packed. After circling the parking lot a couple of times, I finally found a parking space. I stepped out my car and grabbed my bag and purse. After a few minutes, I spotted Paul, whom I met before at Tenant Liberties. His muscular frame nicely filled out his dark blue sports coat, white dress shirt, and gray slacks. I tapped him on the shoulder. Paul looked at me angrily. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "I wanted to pay my respects," I lied. "You didn't even know him," Paul snapped. "I admired the work he did," I replied with a straight face. "Are you a tenant?" Paul asked. "No," I answered. "Then you shouldn't be here," he scoffed. "This is for tenants only." "Look, Paul, I'm not the enemy," I pleaded. "The only thing I own is a condo that I live in, and that's it." "But you're working for that landlord's lawyer's wife, right? So that makes you the same." "Get out," Paul demanded. "I just need to ask you a question." Paul shook his head. "No questions." "Just a minute of your time," I implored. "This is a private event. If you don't leave, I'm calling the cops." "Go ahead. I'll tell them to arrest you for the murder of Manuel and Calvin." "Are you out of your mind?" Paul hissed. "Your client did it. End of story." "If you're so sure, then meet me after the funeral ends." Paul glared at me. "I need to go to the reception after this." "You know what? I don't have time to wait." Meet me after the funeral or your ass will be jail. Paul's face became twisted. Where do you want to meet? On the corner by the bus stop. Text me when the funeral is over, I said as I pulled my business card my purse. I handed my card to Paul. This time don't throw it away. Paul stared at my card and stuffed it in his coat's right pocket. Gotta go now. I nodded. I turned around to see if I knew anyone else. Not one person. It'd be a waste of time to go up randomly and question folks about Samantha. I walked back to my car and got inside. For the next hour or so, I surfed social media sites for any possible leads on the case. To my disappointment, I found nothing but news reports and commentary supporting my client's arrest. At 3 minutes past 7 o'clock, I received the following text from Paul. Erica, can't meet with you. An emergency came up. But I can see you tomorrow at 10 at Liberty's. I texted Paul back, damn it Paul. I need to see you now. Paul responded, sorry. Can't make it. See you tomorrow at 10. Gotta bounce. I wanted to scream, asshole. How dare that jerk cancel our meeting? And what was his so-called emergency? A meeting with a lawyer? For God's sake, I hoped he wouldn't lawyer up on me. If he did, I wouldn't be able to get anything out of him. I then texted Daryl that I'd be home in a bit. When I walked inside my condo, Daryl was cooking my favorite dinner, fried catfish, baked potato, and coleslaw. I smiled as I inhaled its tantalizing aroma. I pecked Daryl on the lips. How was your first day of work? I asked. Daryl grinned. It was great. For the next week, we'll be in training. After that, we'll be doing home visits. Home visits for what? I asked. To remind people to fill out their census. We want to make sure that everyone completes it. That's interesting, I said. Yeah, it is, Daryl replied. What's even better is that there are all of kinds of people working there. The team lead is a retired doctor. There are a couple of laid-off engineers like me. One is my age and the other is a little bit older. And there's a young lawyer. Passed the bar a year ago but couldn't find a job in law. So, she decided to give the census job a try. There's also a few laid-off teachers and some other folks. Babe, it's really interesting mix. Sounds like a great place to work. Yeah, it's good so far, Daryl said while flipping over the catfish in the frying pan. I'm glad that I'm working. I smiled. So am I. So, how's your case going? I related to Daryl what I had found. Daryl's eyes widened. Babe, your prime suspect is an imposter? I nodded. But I don't know where she is. She hasn't responded to my blog post and I need to find out more about her connection to tenant liberties. Aren't you going back to tenant liberties tomorrow? I nodded. Hopefully, I'll find something that will help with the case. I'm sure you will, Daryl said. I hope so, I replied. Daryl turned off the stove and dished out our dinner. We took our plates to the living room and flipped on the TV to watch the news. Nothing new about the case. I was a little disappointed. However, I was glad that there wasn't additional evidence pointing to Liz's guilt. I turned to Daryl and noticed that he looked a little glum. Why the sad face? I asked. I was thinking about my father, he answered. It's been exactly 3 months since he passed away and I really miss him. I'm really sorry, I said. I miss him, too. You know, when my mother died 3 years ago, she had melanoma. It wasn't like she died right away. It took a long time. But when Dad died, he just dropped dead from a heart attack. I didn't even get to say goodbye. Daryl's eyes swelled with tears. I put my hand on Daryl's shoulder. I can't even imagine the pain you're going through. It hurts like hell and I'd wish it'd go away, Daryl said. It will take some time, I replied, squeezing Daryl's hand. And you know what I really miss about my dad? What? I asked. Hanging out with him, Daryl said as he wiped away his tears. We used to do everything together. And I remember the time I brought him to Father's and Son's Day in middle school. Some of the kids looked at me funny when I said he was my dad. Here I was, this white boy with skin almost pale as milk, and my dad was a dark-skinned black man. One kid even said that he didn't know I was mixed with black. And you know what I said? What? I asked while rubbing Daryl's shoulders. I smiled and told him I wasn't black. My mother was white and the man who gave me life was a white man. But he wasn't my daddy. My real daddy was there with me and he was the one who was raising me to be a man. I smiled. Perfect answer. Indeed, it was. Stop the kid from saying anything else. But things like that would happen over and over. Like at high school graduation, parties, and other places. And my dad and I would talk about it. He would say that I was his son and if people had problems with us, That was their problem and not ours. That's good way to look at it, I said. Yeah, it is, he said. I just really miss him. The good times. The sad times. Everything. Memories of him will always be with me. I pulled Daryl toward me and hugged him for a long time. I thought about Daryl's father and times we had spent together. He was a good man and like Daryl, I never would forget him. Chapter 13. I stared at my alarm clock on the night table. I didn't feel like getting up. My meeting with Paul wouldn't be for another 3 hours. I turned to Daryl's side of the bed. It was empty. I smiled. My man was at work. I slowly peeled off the bed covers, walked into the bathroom, and took a quick shower. I walked into my closet and changed into brown wool pants that had an elastic waist and a matching sweater. I went into the living room and turned on my laptop. I checked my email and then clicked on Samantha's blog. There was a new entry posted. Chameleons and Death Friday, February 12, 2010, 1:28 a.m. They think his wife did it, but I know she didn't. How do I know? I just do. Did I do it? Of course, not. I loved him. Who did it? Can't tell you, but I'll give you a clue. The killer loves figs and onions. I pulled out my cell phone from my purse and called my friend Jane at the police department. After a couple of rings, Jane answered. Jane, this is Erica. I think I found a witness to the murder of Calvin Norwich. Who? She asked. Samantha Codflint. She's the nut who was screwing him. We already know about her. Did you see her blog this morning? I asked. Yeah, we did, Jane answered. Claiming that the wife didn't do it. She's full of shit. Jane, think about this. Why would Calvin's mistress say that his wife is innocent? That doesn't make any sense, I argued. Erica, anyone can post anything online and claim anything. That's not evidence. What about the fact she's an imposter? I asked. What you do mean? She's been using the name of a dead woman, Veronica Quainwood. Isn't that illegal? Jane heaved a heavy sigh. We already know about that. Samantha used to be Veronica Quainwood. Changed it for some crazy reason. Now, she goes back and forth between the names. Uses Veronica as a stage name. It's weird but not illegal. But Veronica Quainwood's mother said she was dead. dead? Jesus, Erica, did you see the death certificate? I shook my head. No, but. No, but anything. Samantha is a nutcase and so is her mother. You need to stop wasting your time with them. But she gave a clue, I protested. That she made up, Jane huffed. I think you should follow up. Look, Erica, we aren't going to waste our limited resources on some nut, so she can get notoriety. We've already have real evidence that points to the wife and no one else. What kind of evidence? I asked. Didn't you see the press release? No, I answered. What did it say? It's online. So just read it. Jane replied. Is there anything else you can tell me? I asked. No, Jane answered. Gotta run. I have a meeting in a couple of minutes. All right. I'll talk to you later. I ended the call and then clicked on the internet icon on my phone. Found the Chatham County Police Department and read the press release. According to the police department, strands of Liz's hair were found in the hotel room in Manuel's apartment. They also found some other evidence, which pointed to Liz as well. However, at this point, they weren't going to disclose it publicly. I shook my head. How could the police be 100% sure that Liz was the killer? Samantha surely wouldn't post something just to get some more visits to her blog. Then again, maybe she would. At any rate, I needed to find out whether her clue was real or fabricated. I wrote response to Samantha's post. Figs and onions. Interesting clue. But I don't know anyone who likes that. Like to meet with you. Just tell me where and I'll be there. I hit the submit button. I perused a few websites to check out the news. Nothing new on the case. I then turned off my laptop and put it in my bag. I put on my coat, grabbed my bag and purse, and headed out the door. My next stop would be the women's jail. Chapter 14. I waited for about 10 minutes until a tall, burly female correctional officer brought Liz to the visiting room. Liz was dressed in a red jumpsuit. Her ankles were bound in cuffs. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her pale skin was blotchy with a grayish cast. The correctional officer sat Liz down on a wooden bench and told me to press the button when we were done meeting. After I nodded, the officer left the room. I gave Liz the once over and asked, "How are you feeling?" "Horrible. The food in here is horrendous. I had scrambled eggs this morning. I wanted to puke." They were runny and had weird shit in them. And yesterday for lunch, I had a burnt sandwich with something that was pretending to be cheese. The crap in here isn't even fit for cockroaches. I made a wry face. I'm sorry about that. Jail food is generally gross. Liz nodded and pointed at her hair. About an inch or so of gray roots contrasted with the rest of her colored dishwater blonde hair. The assholes in here laughed at me when I asked for hair dye. Said it's against the rules. I looked at Liz with an expression of bewilderment. Why are you looking at me like I'm crazy? Liz asked. 2 days ago, you didn't have a strand of gray, I replied. I don't understand how your gray could come back so fast. Liz half smiled. I was using a temporary rinse to cover up my gray roots. Been doing that for a while because my colorist didn't have opening until March. The minute I wash my hair, the rinse comes out and you can see the gray roots. It doesn't look that bad, I said. Don't lie to me. I know I look like shit. I shook my head. Sorry, you feel that way. Liz took a deep breath and then exhaled. Do you have any good news about my case? I told her about Samantha, Veronica, the blog posts, and her fetish for impersonations. Liz's eyes widened. So, the slut knows who killed my husband. And Manuel's killer, too, I added. But the cops won't investigate. Screw the cops, Liz hissed. They're the reason why I'm in this damn place. The cops are claiming that they found strands of your hair at the hotel and Manuel's apartment. That's bullshit. I was never at either of those places. Maybe someone planted your hair. Either that or the cops are lying about their so-called evidence. Yeah, that's possible, I replied. So, do you know what Samantha meant by that the killer likes figs and onions? Liz shook her head. I have no idea. It's an odd combination. Actually, it's not that odd. I looked it up online. Apparently, there are all kinds of recipes that use figs and onions. People eat them with pork, beef, fish, and chicken. Sounds interesting. But then again, I'm not much of a culinary expert. Me either, I replied. But there's one thing that's bothering me. What? Liz asked. At our first meeting, you told me that Veronica was underwater in her mortgage. And she was. That's why she lost her house. I shook my head. But the house was under Samantha's name. Liz looked at me with a puzzled expression. And what's your point? I stroked my chin. Your husband didn't know Samantha's real name. Instead, he thought her name was Veronica. Liz shook her head. I still don't understand why it matters. If your husband knew that he was evicting Veronica, he probably wouldn't have taken the case because he would had a clear conflict of interest. Didn't you tell me that the slut said in her blog that Calvin didn't know who she really was? Yeah, she did. So that explains it. Calvin thought he was evicting someone else. I nodded. But what about the address? But wouldn't he have recognized it? Liz shrugged her shoulders. Calvin and his slut met at the Criteway Hotel. Maybe she lied and told him that she was married or living with someone. So that's why they couldn't meet at her house. Yeah, maybe, I said. But if your husband didn't know Samantha's address, how come you had it? Found it online, Liz answered. I narrowed my eyes. There's nothing online that connects Samantha to Veronica. So, you had to find it another way. Liz groaned. Erica, do you want to know the truth? I found text on my husband's phone from the slut. I tailed her after one of their rendezvous. Found out where she lived. Did a search and found out the owner was underwater. Did some more searching and found Samantha's blog and pics. Her photos did her in. I knew that Veronica and Samantha were the same person. And when I found out my husband was evicting Samantha, I had to laugh. There was no way I'd tell him that he was really evicting his little slut. Nope, not my place. Thought she might tell him. But she didn't. She was too damn proud. So, she lost her home. End of story. I glared at Liz. And why didn't you tell me this at the beginning? Because I didn't think it was important, Liz replied in a matter-of-fact tone. Whether the slut's name is Veronica or Samantha, it doesn't really matter. Liz, it does matter because I wasted a lot of time trying to track her down. If I'd known the connection, I could have saved a lot of time. Well, sorry about that. All right. By the way, have you gotten a lawyer? Liz shook her head. No, I decided I didn't want one. I'm representing myself. That's a really bad idea. Erica, I got you as my investigator, and once you find the perp, I won't need one. And what if I don't? I asked. You will, she replied. Liz, you really need to rethink this. A lawyer will protect your rights. And take my money. My cousin Warren talked to a bunch and the cheapest wants a 25 grand retainer and said the total costs could run 200 grand or more if my case goes to trial. Sounds reasonable. I'm not wasting my money on that. You're screwing yourself without a lawyer. No, I'm not, Liz countered. I went to law school and never passed the bar or practiced law. I've watched Calvin's trials, Liz argued. Evicting tenants has nothing to do with criminal cases. The law is the law, Liz said. And besides, my cousin can help me. Is Warren a lawyer? I asked. Used to be, Liz answered. And he practiced criminal law. Warren did a whole bunch thing. Personal injury. Criminal defense. Class actions. You name it. He's done it. I rubbed my chin. Liz, if Warren is a lawyer, why was he looking for one for you? Because he can't practice anymore. Lost his license over some bullshit a few years ago. But he and I talked and he's going to help me. He can't represent me in court, but he can advise me on what to do. I shook my head. That's a really bad idea. You need to find another option. Erica, I've got no money to hire anyone. So, my cousin is my only option. Then plead poverty and get a public defender. Liz shook her head. Already looked into that. Don't qualify. Even though my bank accounts are frozen by the government, I technically have money. Then borrow it. Already did, and that's paying for you. Then borrow more. Can't do that. My sources are tapped out. I sighed. Is there anything else you need to tell me? Not damn thing. Liz answered. Just find the killer soon because this place is aging the hell out of me.